There is a silent, almost imperceptible moment when everything changes. It is not announced with words or grand gestures. It is simply an act of withdrawal. The moment a woman stops chasing, stops insisting, stops being present without being asked. For many, this may seem like a defeat, but for the woman who has understood the power of detachment, that moment marks the beginning of something much more powerful: liberation. When you stop chasing, what you're really doing is reclaiming the power you once gave away. You're not ignoring out of spite, nor are you acting out of pride in disguise. What you're doing is affirming an essential truth that you don't need anyone to validate your worth, and that although it may seem simple, changes everything. But what does a man really feel when you stop looking for him? This question isn't as obvious as it seems, because it's not just about "he misses me" or "he forgets me." What happens is more subtle, more psychological. When you were always there, present, consistent, he didn't have to think too much. Your presence was a guarantee, a certainty. And what is guaranteed, what is constant, tends to lose its shine over time. But when you disappear, without noise, without drama, without complaints, something cracks in the structure he took for granted. The human mind doesn't know how to deal with emptiness. When a constant stimulus is removed, what remains is a space that demands interpretation. And that's when it all begins. Doubts, reflections, questions that didn't exist before. Why isn't she texting me anymore? Is she with someone else? Has she lost interest? Or has she simply realized she doesn't need me anymore? And yet, the point is not what he feels. The point is what that reveals about you. Because detachment is not a seduction technique. It's not a mind game. It is a reflection of inner strength. A reflection that you are no longer willing to give your energy to someone who doesn't value it. In Stoicism, this principle is fundamental. You cannot control what others feel, but you can master your response to what happens. A woman who holds back, who doesn't emotionally kneel at every silence, who doesn't beg for scraps of attention, becomes someone different. Not because she has changed her essence, but because now her energy is directed towards something greater, her own growth. And of course, not all men react the same. Some won't even notice your absence. Others might feel it as an uncomfortable emptiness. And some might start seeking you, intrigued by the sudden change. But in every case, the key is that it's no longer about them. It's about you. If you disappear with the intention of provoking, you're still tied to the need for validation. But if you withdraw because you understand that your time, your presence, your attention are valuable, then you've already won. Because the real change is not whether he misses you or not, but that you stopped being available out of habit. You stopped sacrificing your peace to fit into a dynamic that wasn't meant for you. That's when true detachment is born. When you no longer need to be remembered because you've decided not to forget yourself. And it is in that state of clarity that you begin to see everything with new eyes. You're no longer waiting for a sign. You're no longer checking your phone. You're focused on yourself. And that's an energy that can't be faked. Daniela was one of those women who learned this the hard way. For months, she chased after a man who barely gave her attention. Always present, always waiting, always interpreting every silence as a challenge to solve, until one day, without hate or resentment, she simply stopped. No more messages, no more attempts, just presence with herself. The first days were uncomfortable. Her mind played tricks on her. The urge to write to him again was strong. But she didn't. And with time, the unexpected happened. He began reacting to her posts, asking about her through mutual friends. But the difference was that now she wasn't waiting anymore. Her focus had shifted. It wasn't about winning him back. It was about having regained respect for herself. That is the great paradox. When you disappear, hoping for a reaction, you're still trapped. But when you do it because you finally understand your worth, you become free. And in doing so, you become magnetic, not for what you give, but for what you project. Because the woman who doesn't need to be sought out, who doesn't beg to be seen, becomes a figure of mystery. And mystery always attracts more than any form of insistence. In the emptiness you leave behind, there isn't just absence, there's also a redefinition of value. What once seemed constant now becomes rare. And the rare, the scarce, the unpredictable and uncontrollable, that's what sparks desire. Scarcity is not a strategy, it's the natural result of a woman who has learned not to give herself away. Monica experienced something similar. She was the kind of woman who was always available, who replied quickly, made plans, offered details, constantly sought his validation. And even though he said he liked the attention, deep down he didn't value it. Until Monica shifted her focus, she stopped putting him on a pedestal. She dedicated herself to her body, her projects, expanding her social circle. And, without warning, she simply stopped being available. The interesting thing is how everything changed. Her silence, her new routine, her apparent indifference began to make noise in his mind, questions, suspicions, renewed interest. But by then, Monica was no longer in the same emotional place. She wasn't ignoring him out of resentment, she simply no longer gave him a leading role in her life. She had become a woman with direction, and that is impossible to ignore. When you become someone who doesn't need to be validated, you project a different energy. You're not running away, you're choosing. You no longer react to everything. And when you master that ability, the outside world loses its power over you. It doesn't mean you don't feel or that nothing matters to you. It means you've learned to value the one thing that truly belongs to you, your attention. Attention is your most valuable currency. When you give it away without measure, it loses its worth. But when you direct it with intention, it becomes power. Not because it gives you control over others, but because it returns control to you. Selective attention isn't coldness, it's emotional wisdom. When you consciously choose where to place your energy, you no longer depend on what others do or don't do. You stop chasing what isn't yours and start walking firmly toward what truly builds you. It's a subtle change in appearance, but profound in its effects. Because now, instead of asking yourself if he misses you, you ask if you're respecting yourself. And this is where a key idea comes in. What is abundant loses value. What is scarce becomes appreciated. It's not a quirk of the male mind. It's a universal psychological principle. Gold has value because it's hard to find. Water, even though it's vital, is taken for granted when it flows in excess. The same goes for your presence. When you're always available, your attention becomes ordinary. But if one day, without warning or explanation, you turn inward, the contrast becomes so clear, it's unavoidable. You stop being background noise and become a silence that resonates. And that changes perception. Your absence speaks louder than 1,000 words, not because it shouts, but because it reveals. It reveals that you're no longer willing to insist. It reveals that you're focused on yourself. And that kind of language needs no translation. Many women believe that if they stop reaching out, if they're not present, they'll be forgotten. But what they don't understand is that being remembered is not the same as being valued. You can be constantly present and still be invisible. And you can disappear for a while and leave a deeper mark than any constant presence, because memory doesn't come from insistence, it comes from impact. And the most powerful kind of impact is that of a woman who doesn't depend on anyone, who doesn't wait, who, without saying a word, makes it clear that her path doesn't stop for anyone. That's not pride, it's direction, it's not arrogance, it's purpose. Now, there's a factor many overlook in this process: mystery. And the appeal of mystery isn't a game, it's a psychological need. The human mind needs to close cycles, understand causes, anticipate outcomes, but when it doesn't fully grasp something, when it encounters uncertainty, it triggers a desire to understand more. And that's where a serene, stoic woman becomes profoundly intriguing, not because she pretends to be unreachable, but because she doesn't give everything away, because she's not desperate to be validated or immediately understood. Her life is bigger than a single conversation. Her world is broader than one interaction. And that creates a type of attraction that goes beyond the physical. It's an attraction born of respect, of mystery, of calm. Imagine this: you text a man and he doesn't reply. Hours pass, maybe days. Most would react with anxiety. They'd text again, ask if something happened, seek an explanation. But the woman who knows her worth doesn't fall into that trap. Not because she doesn't care, but because she knows she can't control other people's actions, only her own. And that is her advantage. While others panic, she remains grounded. While others insist, she observes. While some beg, she moves forward. She's not ignoring, she's choosing. She's not reacting, she's responding with calm. Marcus Aurelius said it clearly. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. And in this context, the enemy is not a person, it's an attitude. It's the desperation that makes you lose control. It's the need that makes you forget who you are. It's the anxiety that turns you into someone you don't recognize. But when you choose not to be that way, when you choose to stay calm even in uncertainty, you're doing more than just enduring. You're building character. You're earning respect, even if no one sees it. You're affirming that your energy is not for sale. And that message, though silent, is powerful. That's why detachment isn't coldness, it's self-control. It's not indifference, it's direction. It's not about not feeling, it's about learning not to be swept away by what you feel. Because the woman who masters her inner world has no need to manipulate the outer one. She knows that those who want to be there will be, and those who don't simply aren't part of the journey. And here comes a truth many resist. Not every man will miss you. Some will forget you easily. Others won't even notice your absence. But a few, the ones who may have valued you but failed to show it, will feel that void more intensely. Not because they need you, but because they had grown used to you always being there, always replying, always being available. And when that disappears, they don't know how to interpret it. But you should. You're not trying to provoke anything. You're not waiting to be chased. You're simply living your life with clarity. And that clarity doesn't allow your worth to depend on how others react. A stoic woman is like a fire that burns with quiet intensity. She doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't plead. She simply exists. And those who want to come closer will do so. Those who don't will continue on their path. But she never loses her flame for anyone. Many women make the mistake of thinking that silence, detachment, and emotional distance are punishments meant to manipulate, but that's not true. They are conscious choices to stop wasting energy, to stop giving your soul to someone who doesn't value it. They are decisions born from a deep understanding that your time, your mind, and your attention are worth far more than you've been led to believe. And when you truly understand this, when you live it without needing to explain, it changes everything. The relationships that stay out of conviction. The ones that leave because they were never real. And you, in both cases, remain at peace. Because you're no longer playing the game of being approved. You're walking the path of being authentic. And that path, though sometimes lonely, is the only one that leads to true freedom. The goal is not to be missed. The goal is for you not to need to be missed. For your well-being not to depend on whether someone thinks of you or not. For your emotional stability not to be shaken by an unanswered message. That's the level a stoic woman aspires to, not because she's insensitive, but because she has decided that her peace does not belong in someone else's hands. She has decided she doesn't need to chase what doesn't flow. She has understood that her journey matters more than any fleeting validation. Accepting that not everyone will react the way we hope is a mature way of seeing life. Sometimes we insist, not out of love, but out of ego, because we can't stand the idea that someone doesn't value us, that they don't see what we offer. But the problem is never the other person. The real conflict is within us, our struggle to accept that our worth is not dependent on being reciprocated. When you stop looking for him, when you choose not to insist, you are not losing. You are walking away from a one-sided game. Because what is your peace worth? What is your focus worth? How much more time will you give to someone who barely noticed your presence? Many women believe that showing love means insisting, waiting, being there. But sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away, not to punish, not to create guilt, but to reclaim the power you once gave away. Because in that process of stepping back, not only does his perception of you change, your perception of yourself changes too. You stop living in anticipation of a notification. You stop analyzing every message. You stop begging for attention. And in that silence, you begin to build, not a facade to appear strong, but a real internal structure. You start developing discipline. You commit to yourself. Your free time is no longer filled with anxiety, but with purpose. Your mind stops spinning in circles. And instead of waiting for something to happen, you make it happen. Personal growth doesn't begin when he replies. It begins when you decide you're done waiting, when you understand that your life doesn't need to be put on hold for anyone, when you realize that no message can give you more value than you already possess. Because the woman who needs to be remembered to feel important is still living in the shadow of validation. But the one who acts from awareness, from clarity, from serenity, she no longer depends. She has already chosen to move forward without looking back, without needing closure, without waiting for a "I miss you" that comes too late. And yes, maybe some men will react. Some will come back, intrigued by your silence, drawn to your new energy. But it's no longer about whether they return. It's about whether you still want them there. Because in that journey of growth, you also learn to discern, to see with new eyes, to realize that what you were grieving was often just an illusion. True attraction doesn't come from lack, but from presence, from being whole without needing to be completed. And that is visible, tangible, magnetic. Because confidence isn't something you say, it's something you radiate. And this is where the most powerful Stoic concept comes in, self-mastery. It's not about suppressing emotions, it's about directing them, knowing where to channel them and where not to. Because if you live trapped in the ups and downs of what others do, you'll always lose your way. A woman with direction doesn't change her path for someone who doesn't know where he's going. A woman with purpose doesn't pause her journey for someone who isn't even sure if he wants to walk beside her. And that's the point. Your purpose must be stronger than any fleeting desire. Do you want a relationship? Perfect. But not at the cost of yourself, not at the cost of your peace, not at the cost of begging to be seen. Because the one who begs for attention loses her dignity. And dignity is not negotiable. It's to be protected, honored, and lived. So, what does a man feel when you stop looking for him? Some feel nothing. Others feel intrigued. A few will feel that they've lost you. But you will feel that you have finally found yourself. Because you no longer live dependent on what he feels. You live connected to what you need. And that, my friend, is the beginning of a new chapter. One where you no longer chase anyone. One where you don't pursue, you attract. Not out of strategy, but out of essence. Detachment is not indifference, it's emotional maturity. It's looking at a situation objectively without letting emotions take control. It's being able to love someone without needing to possess them. It's accepting that love isn't always reciprocated and still choosing peace. And that peace comes when you stop justifying the unjustifiable. When you stop fighting for someone who won't fight for you. When you decide that your time is sacred and will only be shared with those who deserve it. Because the real change doesn't happen when he comes looking for you. It happens when you no longer feel the need to look for him. When you understand that your value isn't measured by his response, that your presence should not be given away, but chosen, that your energy should not be negotiated for crumbs of attention. And when you live this way, something curious happens. You start attracting with more power, but you no longer care as much. Because what once made you anxious now simply passes. What once felt urgent is now calm. What once caused anxiety is now clarity. You stop being a shadow chasing the light, You become the fire that lights its own path, and that is irresistible. If this message resonated with you, if you've ever been in that situation where you chose to walk away not as punishment, but as an act of self-love, I want to hear from you in the comments. Share your experience. Tell us what the process of letting go and rebuilding from within was like. And if you're in the middle of that journey right now, remember, you're not alone. This channel is for women like you who want to grow, mature, and build a life of purpose. So, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear these words. And if you want to keep learning how to master your mind, your energy, and your relationships from a stoic and conscious perspective, watch the next video I've linked for you. I promise it will help you see everything with new eyes.